Thank you. If we can go back one. In the harrowing aftermath of a major wildfire, it's hard to imagine the regenerative power of the fire itself. Now, I don't want to belittle such a tragic event. I moved to Denver in November 2020, and I've seen firsthand the devastation of these wildfires. But it was on a hike in July where I visited a mountainous region I'd been to 12 months earlier that looked exactly like this. And I was inspired by the power of nature to rejuvenate. Now let's reflect on rejuvenation for a second. To give new life or vigor, as beautifully illustrated by this vibrant plant growing from the devastation. But it was only when I researched this further that I realized that the actual force of some of these fires is necessary for certain flora and fauna to actually reproduce and thrive. For example, the cones of the lodgepole pine, native to the Yellowstone region, are so tightly bound in a resinous bond that it's only the intense heat of the fire that cracks them open and the tree can reproduce. And the Australian fire beetle's larva can only develop and hatch in newly burnt wood. So much so that the beetle has developed sensors to detect a wildfire 40 miles away and move towards it. So rejuvenation, to give new energy and vigor, to revitalize. Now you may be wondering, what is this David Attenborough wannabe doing at a Gartner conference? And then I'm channeling my English accent that's native. Well, I would offer to you that the way we work, the way that we treat talent is also in a rejuvenation. Of course, caused by another tragic event, the pandemic. I like to refer to it sometimes as the largest forced experiment in the history of work. And that has uncovered things that are possible. Reflect for a second. What aspects of work or talent have been rejuvenated from that experience? And what we're going to cover in the rest of the session is what does it take to flourish in this new environment? And we're going to look at 3 aspects of performance. 1, employee performance. 2, collaboration performance. And 3, the performance of the office. Now, why performance? You may have heard we're in a very high inflation environment. There's significant concerns about recession. So I think you would agree, whilst fatigue and burnout, talent attraction and attrition are all vital, the one thing that we all need is high-performing teams. High performance, whether we're in government or the commercial sector. If we have a skeptical CEO or chief financial officer or business partner, maybe some of you in the room. So we're going to look through the lens of performance. And for each of these areas, I'm going to share with you some of Gartner's latest data. I'm going to offer a clear action that you can take and support it with some tactics, some implementation tactics and case studies. So let's look first at employee performance. I'm going to look at this simple model, which is what we thought was true before the pandemic, what we discovered was true due to that experience, and then a clear action that all of you can take. So for employee performance, what did we think that was true? Productive work happens in the office, correct? Now, sure, maybe some of you had teleworking, but often it was thought of as an accommodation, a luxury. Maybe we didn't talk too loudly to our chief executive about that. Could have been a mistake, by the way. What did we discover that was true? A lot of productive work can happen really well, working from home, working remotely. And employees love the autonomy that it provided. When we ask all of you all the time, how was productivity and performance during the pandemic? Most of you say it got better. In fact, we're more worried about people being burnt out. So what can we do? What's the action we can take? Gartner's for a long time had an approach, about 18 months, of a human-centric work design. And within that, providing people the autonomy to achieve outcomes. Now, I'm going to unpack this action, give you some tactics and some examples. But if there's a takeaway from this section, it is that a human-centric work design that gives people autonomy to achieve their outcomes is the winning model. Now, I'm excited to share some brand new data. This is the first major research study we've done where all of the respondents are working in their organization's post-pandemic model. So we asked them, do you know what it is? This is the permanent model that we're moving towards. Are you beyond a voluntary phase or a pilot phase? Yes, yes. Everyone else was screened out. So we have data looking at, and the first set of data I'm going to show you is different flexible work models. I'm sure that's a burning question on your tongues. How does a 3-2 model, 3 days in the office, 2 at home, most often Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, compare with fully back to the office, et cetera, et cetera? So I'm going to show you some pretty detailed data here and give you the highlights. I want to give you the data in the handouts. This is brand new, as I said, so that you have it. One of the expressions we have in this very emotional subject of work is trust the data, not your gut. So let me show you. What we have here is 5 different work models. 1.0 is the average performance, or the average likelihood of performance. So anything below that 1.0 is below average. Maybe the first thing you notice here is only one of the 5 different flavors has above average performance. We call that flexible hybrid. So yes, it's hybrid, but it offers a lot of flexibility for employees, for leaders, for teams to decide what works best. The hybrid fixed. Very commonly, that's a 3-2 model. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays in the office. You can see here, below performance, both in terms of intent to stay, an early indicator of retention, performance or employee performance in the middle, the dark bar, as well as fatigue. You're going to see this data on many charts. So I'm going to emphasize the performance data. Mandated office visits, where people are going to the office because they feel they must. The policy says I must. My boss expects me to. Low data, fully on site. So we can see here, if we're just contrasting the degree of flexibility in the work, there is one clear model that drives better outcomes. But there's a bigger story here. Gartner's human-centric work design performs even better. So employees that have these human-centric characteristics are 3.8 times higher performance than when they don't exist. Now, what is a human-centric? It includes 3 things. First of all, this flexible work environment, like the hybrid flexible that I've shown you here. Intentional collaboration. We're going to talk about that in the second section of this talk, and empathy-based management. So let's dig a little deeper into the data. 2 aspects here that I talked about. One is autonomy. Providing people autonomy to achieve outcomes gets 2.3 times higher likelihood of high performance, and empathy 2.9 times, nearly 3 times higher. Now, you may be thinking, or you may work for bosses, chief executives, etc., that have this nagging doubt. If we just let everyone have this flexibility, do whatever they want, surely it's going to be a free-for-all chaos. How can that be productive? And you're absolutely right. That's not what we're saying. So let's look at some implementation tactics, some ways that we can avoid this free-for-all chaos. The first one is a concept I'm calling accountable autonomy. First and foremost, let's hold people accountable for the goals, for their performance measures. Or put another way, we're going to trust you to do the right thing. We're going to trust you to deliver. But right alongside that and interlocking with it is autonomy. We're then going to provide you the autonomy for how you achieve those outcomes. And we're going to measure you based on outcomes, not inputs, or not micromanaging. I've done some work with the CIO of San Diego Sheriff's Department, and he has a great example of this that he's previously shared with us, which is, I want to give my employees as much flexibility as possible, but we have accountability to support a 7/24 police force and prison service. So if there's a major incident, we need to be able to respond and come on site. That's our accountability. So I can't offer you the opportunity to work anywhere in the country. This is an example of these sort of trade-offs. Now, Virgin Money, a UK-based financial services organization, is deploying these sort of thinking. We interviewed David Duffy, the CEO. He talks about a concept of team rhythms that I'm going to explain later, but the main point here is he says we don't mandate anything to our employees in terms of number of days and this, but we offer choices, but with choices comes responsibility. Novartis, the pharmaceutical company, calls their program Choice with Responsibility. So we see these concepts showing up in many ways in organizations' principles and policies and cultural statements around flexible work. Now, there's another important thing that came out of our data. How we're going to implement these new models needs to be adaptive. And it needs to include input from employees. Think about it. We're reinventing something as deeply ingrained in work that we've worked in, most of us, for decades. 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in the office. Now, the forced experiment was forced on us. In some ways, that was easier than figuring out this new hybrid model. So it's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to get it right first time. So we should embrace an agile mindset, continually iterating, continually adapting based on data, doing experiments, doing learning loops, and getting better. So once again, in this same study, where all of the respondents were living their new models, we asked, how are you implementing? Where it was more adaptable, 1.6 times higher employee performance. Where it included employee input, 2.5. And as we said in that last slide, we anticipate this for the next 12 to 18 months as a particular focus for this ongoing adaptation, ongoing getting it right. Now, how do we get employees' input? This is another example from the Virgin Money case. They actually developed an application to do that. The application helps employees self-discover how they can be most productive. What are the factors that are most important to them? So, for example, for some employees, it may be having flexible work arrangements because they've got a long commute, young family, or looking after elderly relatives. For others, it may be to work on the most exciting project, the new technology, or to have an accelerated career progression path with mentors and support. So they're factoring these in, letting employees self-discover. There's a chatbot behind this, but the basic thing is then to tee up a conversation with the managers. Now, I'm going to go back to this concept of team rhythms from Virgin Money. Now, on the one side of a team rhythm, over here, is individual flexibility. And as I mentioned, and Virgin Money called this out, they say if we just let everyone do exactly what they want, it's going to be uncoordinated chaos. Right? That's not going to be productive. But at the same time, on the other side, if we go to the other end of the spectrum, right, it's top-down, it's one-size-fits-all that hardly fits anyone, it's very static, it doesn't adapt. That's going to be more like a flat line. That's not going to meet individuals' needs. It's not going to give them autonomy. So what's in the middle? Virgin Money call it team rhythms, moving together. It's more about collective flexibility, how teams can be accountable for their goals. It's team-led, and it also changes, it's dynamic. So let me give you a couple of examples, and often the team rhythms start at a senior part of the organization. So let's say the CFO, looking at the CFO way of working, or the finance organization's way of working, sets a rhythm around the quarterly close, right? That's important in their world. We're going to set a rhythm of when people get together, when the intense work happens physically around that. For us as technology professionals, the equivalent may be something like big room planning if we're implementing scaled agile or agile approach or PI increment. A quarterly event that we can set a rhythm around at the top level. We can combine that with things like town hall type activities. And then underneath those top level rhythms, we can give teams flexibility. Now, the third implementation tactic is to roll out with team agreements. Now, Virgin Money have done this, but here's another case study from Edgewell, a personal care company in the Northeast. And they provide these templates for employees to work through this process with their managers and come up with a team agreement. It's kind of a social contract. It's a way of thinking about what do we need based on our team's goals, based on our accountabilities to be successful. When do we need to get together? When can we work apart? And should we? And we need to work apart. How do we communicate? Now, this team agreement is just one part of a bigger process. So in their process, very similar to Virgin Money and others that we've seen, they start by taking into account individual preferences, then balance those with the accountability of the team. They then go through the process of agreeing a team agreement, but it's not static. So every 90 days, they will do a retrospective of how well that's working and make the necessary adjustments. And over time, get closer and closer to the goal. So to summarize employee performance, as I started to implement a human-centric work design that provides people the autonomy to achieve their outcomes. Set a principle of accountable autonomy, implement adaptively with employees, and roll out with team agreements. Now let's go to the second of our performance categories, collaboration performance. What did we think was true prior to the pandemic? Creativity, innovation, collaboration happens best when we're all together, serendipitously. The classic water cooler moment when all this magic happens. Now let me ask you, and don't leave me hanging like the high five where I'm left-handed, so someone please shout out some answers here. Where do you have your most creative moments? I heard in the shower. Yes, absolutely. Now, I didn't hear anyone that said, when I'm in my 12th meeting back-to-back at the end of the day, right? We know that our brains shut down cognitively. We've got research to prove that. In the shower is when we have our most creative moments. Typically not when we're serendipitously together in the office, by the way, right? So, what did we discover that was true? Well, a couple of things. One is, innovation can actually flourish when we're all remote. We heard many times people say there's been more innovation in my industry or in my company or in my government agency in the last 6 months than in the previous 6 years. Now, I absolutely understand there was a devastating event, the pandemic, but at the same time, it happened remotely. But also we discovered that there's real value in asynchronous work, like the time to think, to have that creativity. So what's the action? To intentionally combine asynchronous work and synchronous work depending on the team's needs, the goals we're trying to achieve. So let's again look at the data. We have the same thing. We have 5 different styles of collaboration. The 2 on the left are both ones that emphasize being synchronously together and emphasizing meetings where we're all going to talk. You see below average outcomes. As we start moving towards where asynchronous communication is encouraged and we can contribute outside of meetings, because no one likes meetings, right? We get an improvement in performance and particularly intent to stay. As we combine synchronous and asynchronous and we're intentional about it, you can see some of the best outcomes. And similarly to before, this is the second dimension of our human-centric model. So the intentionality with asynchronous and syncs is the more human-centric part of this. So once again, looking at the data, and one of the places to start is with employees' own needs. So where employees felt that their needs were taken into account, this doesn't mean uncoordinated chaos, as we talked earlier, but this is like, I'm being listened to, I'm seeing that we're trying to get the best of all worlds here, we can work. So let's look at another example. This is an example from Dropbox. And another piece of news alert here is everyone's collaboration needs aren't the same. So what Dropbox has tried to do is help employees think through, and managers, by doing this collaboratively, where are the collaboration needs? So for example, to what extent in your current job, to be successful right now, do you need to collaborate with the broader teams? Not at all, somewhat, a lot. Now, if an employee maybe doesn't need anything today, but they're very ambitious, they're looking for career growth, you'll see on the third one down, to what extent, based on your career ambition, do you need to collaborate? Now, some may say, you know what, right now I'm dealing with a situation at home, I need to keep my head down, just deliver, I maybe rethink that next year. Another employee may say, no, I want to be getting ready for the next move. I want to be collaborating right now. I want to be working with other parts to get a promotion. So once again, this is a way to begin to think through what do individual employees need from their collaboration, and where they can come up with a scoring and help employees get the collaboration that they need to be successful, not some arbitrary, everyone's going to come to the office for 3 days in order that magical collaboration can happen. Now, one of the philosophies that Dropbox have is we're going to facilitate then these connections, not mandate them. So using some of that data and insight as to what employees are looking for, they provide ways to connect them virtually via a matching platform, connection by routes, by interest areas, by what people are looking to achieve, and also in the physical world where possible. Now, the second of the implementation tactics that we've talked about is to intentionally combine asynchronous and synchronous ways of working based on the goal. So let's look at what that may look like for an innovation example. And this is illustrative. You could apply this in many ways, but I'll try and give you a simple one. So let's say we're trying to innovate in a particular area, solve a particular problem. Maybe we kick it off with a synchronous, on a digital collaboration tool. Cool, we're going to get everyone on the same page as to what we're trying to achieve. We're going to maybe generate some initial ideas. Then we go to an asynchronous collaboration mode, where, let's say, depending on the goal, maybe we're going to spend the afternoon or the next 3 days, where people can give input asynchronously to the same digital whiteboard or collaboration canvas. 3 days gives us 3 shower moments. Whoever said that, right? Or 3 runs to generate great ideas. I don't want to prejudge how often any of us shower, but you get the idea. Maybe this is a big, critical initiative, so we're going to actually get people together in the office. We're going to do an innovation jam event, right? And then we're going to have some time maybe where we can upvote and downvote the best ideas. Or we're going to have people contribute to picking from A or B. And we close out the project. So hopefully you can see this is intentional. Now, at the start, maybe we have to help people think through and build these skills, build this muscle. But over a period of time, and many of you, I'm sure, do versions of this today, right, we can get to great collaboration. And we can actually do this even within a short meeting. So let's say we have a 2-hour meeting. We're going to do that synchronous brainstorming, and then we're going to say, everyone turn your cameras off, everyone take 30 minutes and contribute ideas asynchronously. We can help different personality types contribute. So once again, this is a simple innovation example, and when we do get together, let's make it worthwhile. We're innovating around a drone. Let's start playing with a drone. If it's in our distribution center, or we're innovating around chatbots in our call centers in government, let's go and do the synchronous event in those areas physically with some of the people that are doing the job every day. So the last of our tactics is to accommodate individual styles. We've talked about that a little bit. You can see here again, really increases intent to stay in this example by 2.5 and performance by 2. So what does that look like? This is kind of a similar type approach, but I'm going to bring out some of the personality types and some of the neurodiverse considerations here. Because one of the things that's been fascinating during the pandemic is many diversity types have actually, in relative terms, thrived. So let's look at that. When we're doing synchronous work, often there's a bias of certain leaders because it's what they're used to, it's what they're comfortable with or what we're comfortable with, right? To love this synchronous brainstorming with everyone in the room. However, if we look at it through the lens of introverts, that's often not the way they can make their best contribution. They can be most high in performance. They do better in this more asynchronous mode. Similarly, we can look at it through the lens of optimists. You know, optimists often are very comfortable putting out half-baked ideas, you know, having them kicked around by others. And the more senior we are, often the more comfortable we are with that. But people that are more of a pessimist personality type, they like to formulate the ideas internally first, think them through before they're out there for criticism, etc. And this can cause people just to shut down, not to contribute. And then there's a hierarchy trap, right? Some of the junior members, maybe people that are new to the organization that have some of the freshest ideas that we want to capture actually are going to be quieter, right? Or they're going to be stifled because the boss said such and such, so therefore I won't. So once again, if we're intentional, how we use these modes, how we use the digital technologies, we can overcome this, right? For example, we could do this session where everything's anonymous on our digital tools to overcome many of these things. So to recap the collaboration style, to intentionally combine asynchronous and synchronous, very much taking into account employees' needs, and to use each of the modes where it really has an advantage. And once again, that's going to flex with the types of problems, the types of things that we're doing. So the last of our three is the office itself. What did we think that was true about the office? Well, often it was, this is the place where all work happens. It's the default for work. Productive work, all work. Just look at this beautiful office. What did we discover that too? An awful lot of people could be very productive working from home. It's actually less distracting in some cases once they got it sorted out, right? And the value proposition of the office has skewed towards more of a connection, connectivity, collaboration, social interaction. So what can we do? To, in some ways, rebrand, to rethink about the value proposition, the purpose of the office in more of that way, and in some cases remodel as needed. Now, I'm going to share with you an office remodel example at the end, which is beautiful and took a lot of budget. But while we're looking at this picture, one government CIO said, you know, if I can stop losing a couple of people in turnover I didn't need to lose, I can actually open up some space in some of my offices, buy the furniture from IKEA that is, or a similar place that's on wheels, you know, we can reconfigure it, and we can actually do some of this repurposing the office on a very low budget. And I'm sure many of you are somewhere in that spectrum between. Now, in our data, we looked at and we asked people in this study, why are you visiting the office? Now, the top three things in orange we described as purposeful reasons, right? To meet specific people, for specific events, for social connections, connectivity. The next ones in the light blue, they were coming in because they were told they must. They were mandated. Now, which of these do you think drives the better performance? Right? I think we can guess, right? But here is the actual data. So the green ticks are statistically significant, improved performance. The caution marks are less. You know, that's below and above that one line. But you can see here, you know, an increase in performance, intent to stay, fatigue, when we have these more purposeful reasons for visiting the office. So the office is being skewed towards we spaces. Those we spaces, to really get the benefits, have a lot of different flavors, big team meetings, more small teams, and ideally, if we can make it reconfigurable. Some people are doing things with gymnasiums and childcare, right? And that's another way we can actually build connections with people. But the me spaces, or the individual things, certainly we're moving towards more hoteling, but another trend that we're seeing is to have these phone booths, or these private areas where people aren't being distracted and disrupted. Another tactic is to not have people come into the office for arbitrary days, but more moments that matter, purposeful reasons. We've talked about some of these already. It could be work events, such as a PI planning or a big room planning in our agile process, or kickoffs to big change initiatives. It could be employee change events like onboarding or ongoing activities. Now, Mikkel Holborn from ING, America's CIO, he gets his team together, offers a lot of autonomy, as you can see there. Teams can decide, but he finds a lot of value in what he calls an open your pockets meeting. So this is a meeting where he gets together with his direct reports, and there's no agenda. But it's a place where we can really talk about what's going on. We can really maybe vent if necessary, or we can really get under the covers of these deeper, more personal, more social issues, right? Something that's done better in a face-to-face environment. And certainly we can stack some of these reasons to get together and create a day or a couple of days, not by week, but quarterly, let's say. So we can bring together maybe the overall operating view, a review of how we're doing as a department. We can have these breakouts where teams get together or deliberately mix them up, have social events or ongoing or new onboarding opportunities. And remodeling offices. We ask questions about, have you remodeled your office? Or has it not been remodeled, but you think it needs to be? Once again, the data is overwhelming here of the benefits of having an office that's fit for purpose for this new hybrid operating model. So I mentioned showing you an office remodel. This is Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto are based in Australia. They're a mining company. A lot of their mines are open cast. So their head office remodel includes this pit. It's linking them to the purpose of their mining. And it's a place where they can get together and have these bigger company-wide or department-wide meetings. They also have a lot of different collaboration spaces that are suited for different collaboration types and different worker types, neurodiverse types. Smaller private booths, larger meetings, etc. And they really use the office as a way to attract talent. So imagine doing a college intern recruiting program or something. So our opportunity in terms of office performance is to reinvent it as more of a place, not exclusively, but more of a place of connection, of we spaces, and to focus on, when we do bring people in, moments that matter or purposeful, not just arbitrary days. So I'd like to just summarize, and this slide is really a takeaway of the 3 actions and the tactics. To generate or improve employee performance, a human-centric design that gives people autonomy to achieve outcomes. For collaboration, to be intentional and combine asynchronous and synchronous. And for the office, pivot the role to the one of more we spaces and remodel if necessary. And to finish, I believe that we are at a unique time. We're coming out of the pandemic, and there's great signs of rejuvenation in work and talent. But we need to seed them. We need to revitalize and grow and nurture and cherish with this sort of adaptive approach. Sure to reduce burnout, sure to attract top talent, sure to retain our talent, but most importantly, so that we can drive performance in any economic condition that we see ahead. Thank you, and I wish you the very best in your journey to a human-centric work design. Appreciate it.